So once you have worked with PsycInfo and done your literature search and identified an article that you want to do a summary with, then you're ready, right? Well, maybe not. I'm going to the article summary assignment here and just wanted to point out here at the bottom that for a lot of you, this might be the first time you're doing an article summary. And I wanted to just provide a little video here on some tips and tricks for your approach to reading articles, gathering the information out of an article, and putting it into a form so that you can have your first complete article summary. Because it is hard reading journal articles. They are designed for people who already understand a lot of what they're saying. But when we first start reading papers, that's not the case. I know when I was at the beginning of my program, I couldn't get past the first couple of pages before I was lost. And it just took a long time of getting more information and making myself work through at least the pieces of the article that I did understand before it started coming together more. And I still find articles that are difficult for me to read. So it's an ongoing process. But anyway, I wanted to start with letting you see a little bit of my approach for how I read an article and organize the information and make notes about it, and then give you some tips on pulling that information together and drafting it to your final first article summary. So I'm going to go to an article I picked up. It's not one that you're using. This article is, does venting anger feed or extinguish the flame? Catharsis, rumination, distraction, anger, and aggressive responding. So when I have an article that I've identified that, okay, this is the one I want to summarize, I usually start by reading just the abstract and making sure that it is what I'm really after before I read the whole thing. So making sure that the information in this first part fits the bill. And then I'll start reading in the intro for a little bit. I'm kind of skimming just the headings. Like, okay, they're going to talk about the catharsis theory, and then a cognitive new association theory, and a rumination and distraction. So I'm just looking at the headings as I go through to kind of get a feel for how this article is laid out. Sometimes if I start losing track, I'll go ahead and jump to the discussion at the end, because that's where the author pulls it all together and comes up with what they feel their final information is that they got out of this study. Another thing I do is I use highlighting, and I know that sometimes some folks might want to print out the article and make notes in the margin. That's a good idea too. I've seen that helps a lot, but sometimes I'll highlight to help me be able to pick out information later. Like here, the word catharsis comes from the Greek word katharos, which literally translated means cleansing or purging. So this is a definition, and I can use my highlighter. I usually use the color green when I'm highlighting a definition, because when I go to explain the article to a new reader in my summary, I might have to define some of those terms that the reader might not know about, right? So if I see a definition in what I'm reading that I might have to explain that to someone else, I'll go ahead and highlight that in green. And you can change the colors of your highlights. You can go to the properties of the highlight. I'm in Adobe Reader, and I can change the color like that. I can go to, say, if I wanted it pink instead. Right? And I can change how deep I want that pink. But like I said, I usually put my definitions in green. So another way I can get to properties is Control or Command if you're on a Mac, the letter E, and that will pop open my little properties box there. So I can just say, well, I want that one green, and that way I know it's a definition when I go looking for it later. Some other colors that I tend to use, I use pink for like the main points, like, hey, that's a main point that I want to make sure I talk about in my summary of this article. I'll do that in pink. And then if I see something statistics related that either I want to point out or I'm not sure what that is, then I'll highlight that in yellow for me to look at later. And then I use blue when it's a reference, like a source that the article is referencing that I want to go check on later. And that's a good way to find more articles about what you're interested in by looking at what this article has cited. So we'll scroll through this one and see what I've already highlighted in it. So I felt that this was a main point. According to cognitive neoassociation theory, ruminating while venting should prime aggressive thoughts, feelings, and behavioral tendencies. Whereas here is a definition. Here in the yellow are different things about the statistics, about the methods that this study used, how they sorted their participants. They randomly assigned them to different groups and what they had each group do. So this is all about like the method of that study. And then pink again, a main point that I found that I'm like, okay, I want to nail this one down. And let's see if we have a blue one. That's like just another yellow. Sometimes I even put notes, like that one has a note to it. And the way you add a note is you just select the highlight thing and you double click it. And now I have a place I can put notes about this highlighted area. So here I have, instead participants in the no punching bag group did nothing at all, and I put myself a little note. Or did they? Were control group participants asked what they did with the time? Like, we don't know what the control group did. So that would be leaning into that critique. Sometimes you're asked to critique the article or have a section that says, what is your evaluation of it? And I left myself a little note saying, well, the researchers say that the control group didn't do anything, but we don't know what they did in those 2 minutes if they weren't being monitored, and they really did not tell us anything else about it. So it's a way of me reminding myself where I might have something to say about the critique or evaluating the article. Log linear analysis, I wasn't sure what that was, so I highlighted it so that I could go look at it later. And I know there is a blue in here somewhere. There we go. So overall, the present results support cognitive neoassociation theory by Berkowitz, 1993. So if I wanted to learn more about that theory, I would go look up that reference in the reference list. And I can go down to Berkowitz 93 in the references, and I put a blue there as well. And it looks like it's a book that maybe that book's available in the library. So when you start pulling together multiple sources talking about a topic that you're interested in, it's good to find the sources and the references that one paper used that leads you to other sources you can use. So that's one way that I go through a paper and I'm looking for the main points, and I'm looking for if I have other information I want to look up, and I'm using green for the definitions, like that. And that's one way that you can approach looking through an article, reading it, and making notes on what pops out to you. another thing I wanted to point out, when you are organizing the information, it helps to look at the rubric here. Think about what is the purpose of that study. And if I can just write myself a little bit about what was the purpose of that Bushman study, and then a paragraph on what methodology did they use, where were their participants from, those 3 groups that they put them in, things like that. What results did they find? Another section for that. And then my evaluation of those little tips I gave myself on, are they certain? Could there be an alternative explanation for the results they were finding? And then lastly, I go through and make sure all my APA is up to speed, that I don't have any spelling errors, that I have headings for my different sections so that it's easy for the reader to follow, things like that. And I also gave you guys some information. It's in the modules. In the undergrad class, you can find the APA and writing resources in the Begin Here module, and also the tips from Duke. I also placed that same resource in Chapter 2 with a link to go to the APA Writing Resources page there. In the graduate level course, you would look in the module about the assignments and lab work for the APA and writing resources and the tips. For the APA writing resources, it goes over just some common mistakes, ways to avoid plagiarism, and some other videos for writing basics. Some links to APA stuff, and also tips for citations and references. In general, my feedback is going to give you the location in the APA manual where to find more information about the error, the APA error. And then for the tips from Duke, it's pretty helpful. It was easy flow through. It's just 2 pages, kind of how they suggest you would approach reading and doing a summary or critique of a journal article. So they say to skim the article, just look it through, and then read more carefully, read through the methods and results, and then start working on your first draft by putting it into your own words. Like, what are they really trying to say here? Writing your draft and looking over your format and your organization. So that looked like a help as well for when you're writing your first article summary. So I hope that helped get a start on your article summary, and I'm looking forward to reading your results.